and I ran into you there.
Yeah, I think I do remember that.
Okay. I have this clear memory of wanting to actually get hired there, which I didn't, but I wanted to get hired because you were like, as I was leaving, you're like, Dan. And I was like, oh, holy shit, Erik, how are you doing? And then you were like, are you going to work here? And I was like, I hope, especially since they're playing all this techno music while you're working.
Okay.
You remember that?
No, I don't remember the techno music. Wow.
Yeah. It was like I walked into like a scene in a horror movie where like the villain is sending you to hell. Welcome to Accelerativ Thrust. I'm Dan.
And I'm Erik.
And I gotta mention something real quick. So you've been, of course, following our messages that we've been getting in Instagram. Well, Babe Report messaged us and talked about how much they liked the review. And I, coincidentally, this is completely coincidental. I couldn't believe it. Mentioned Oneida, of course. And not only the review, but also mentioned Oneida in what I've been listening to last week. And it turns out that Babe Report's drummer used to intern for Oneida's recording studio called the Acropolis.
That's pretty crazy.
That's unbelievable. And not only that, I made the comment that, well, Oneida is like the polar opposite of Babe Report, but it turns out that drummer is hugely influential, hugely influenced by Kid Millions, the drummer of Oneida.
Wow. Yeah.
That is what a freaking connection.
Yeah.
And so
I also think that like the idea that you said they were polar opposites isn't necessarily accurate. You were saying about how much Oneida experiments and varies with their sound.
Exactly, which Babe Report does too, but on a different level. And actually, if you listen to Oneida's recent stuff, it is a lot more, I guess you could say, conventional than a lot of their other stuff. It's closer to like just straight up rock music than a lot of their earlier stuff was. And so I do think that there are similarities between the two bands. It's really, really interesting, you know? But that's pretty crazy. But it got me thinking, Erik. I think I'm a prophet.
Oh, snap. Okay.
I think I can predict the future.
I thought you meant you made money.
Well, Profits. that's gonna come. You just watch. But
okay, so what you can tell the future? Is that what you said?
I can tell the future. I was able to conjure up the fact that Babe Report's drummer is into Oneida, and so if you don't mind, Erik, I'd like to predict your future.
Okay.
Would that be okay?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. Erik Whitaker, you are going to talk about something that has to do with Dungeon Synth today.
Oh. Wow.
Erik.
Wow. Yes.
You are going to review an album today with Dan.
Okay. Wow.
Erik.
Yes.
You're also going to mention another album that you possibly were going to pick.
Yeah. That's true. Probably true. Yeah.
Both of them have kind of similarities, but are also highly different from each other, much like Babe Report and Oneida.
Right. That's all full circle. Wow.
Okay, so I believe that is your future. Let's see if it comes true.
Okay. Okay. Let's see. So yeah, the thing I picked this week. Just make it true.
Yeah, let's just make it true.
So I feel kind of bad. This is the story. I picked one record and I sent it to Dan. And then I got nervous about that pick, and so I picked a different record. But then I thought maybe Dan wouldn't like the one I picked, And so I said, well, let's do the other one. I think I went back and forth like 3 or 4 times for real between.
It was really only like once, honestly, once or twice. It may have seemed like it, but it was like once or twice.
Yeah. So basically I made Dan listen to 2 records this week, which I think both of them are fairly short. One was maybe a half an hour, the other was like 20 minutes. So not that crazy.
Yeah, but, and the one that's a half hour has fewer songs.
True. Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, we can just mention that one. We don't have to do like a full review or anything, but it's called Stress Orphan. Mm-hmm. And I would say Stress Orphan is really interesting because I would say it has to fall into the dark ambient category. Dark ambient noise and even elements of like actual harsh noise and even power electronics and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. But the difference is this one has like a sci-fi element to it. Like it incorporates a lot of synths, like spacey sounding synths. And part of the reason I thought Dan may not like it is because of the vocalizations of it really resemble kind of like Doctor Who, kind of the dialects kind of sounds like that. I don't know how to describe it, but it's pretty constant and it's through almost every song. And so I thought maybe Dan wouldn't like it. I think it's really cool, especially in this genre. It's really different from other things. Mm-hmm. And I do think there are some moments on it that are just like really cool and brutal and like intense synth worship. And so parts of it I thought were really cool. But yeah, I also thought maybe it wouldn't be as fun as what I ended up picking. So I don't know. If you want to talk about Stress Orphan, we can. Sure. We can just do kind of a double review.
Yeah. What's I basically wrote reviews on both of them.
Oh, okay.
So cool. We might as well because I did listen to both of them.
Come on, everybody! It's record time.
You were essentially like kind of right in the beginning. I listened to I'll just admit it. I listened to Stress Orphan, and at first I was just like, what the hell?
Yeah.
Like it really stopped me in my tracks. I was like, wow, this is like really scary sounding, but not in a cheesy way either. I essentially at first really did like a lot of the music and a lot of the samples that were on there. It gave me the vibe more of a horror movie than sci-fi. Like, especially when he starts like kind of doing like a talking, singing type thing where he literally sounds like what you would imagine Satan would sound like.
Satan.
Because it really did sound like a scene in a horror movie where like the villain is sending you to hell or something. Like
was you're really being banished almost.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, like you're being banished. And like he does it very, very well. It's very eerie, creepy, cold and dark and just you're absolutely right, Eric. There's not a lot of joy on this record. It's
no.
As far as the voice goes, that's interesting. You talked about Doctor Who because there's a lot of villains in Doctor Who that do talk like that. But I also think that that's kind of a villain trope, honestly, like in a lot of movies. What his voice honestly reminded me of more than anything, and I don't know, you might disagree with me on this, Eric, but honestly, it reminded me of like Matt Pike or like Neurosis or something.
Yeah.
It had that sort of, I don't want to say death metal because it really isn't death metal, but it's like, it does have that kind of low end. And then musically, it really, I do see the sci-fi element, but also horror element because it did sound like a lot of John Carpenter worship for sure.
Right.
And also Blood Incantation.
Yeah, it's cool. I don't know. It's a project from Erik Trude from Fairfax, Virginia. I didn't look too much into this, but this seems to be based on an old sci-fi book.
Really?
Yeah, I don't know. I didn't do a lot of research about it because we weren't going to talk about it, but that's what it seems to kind of be about. I don't know. The author's name is John Brunner. Yeah, and he's an author, and this album is dedicated to him and seems to have maybe something to do with his writing. I'm not sure exactly. I really enjoyed it. I do think that here's the thing. I think when you think about synth type records or even dark ambient records, there's parts to that are definitely here on this recording.
Yeah.
But you have to be able to accept that this is also power electronics / harsh noise. So it follows some of those elements as well. Like if you go see a harsh noise artist and they're just screaming into a distortion pedal with delay on it for the 20 minutes they play, that's the sound. Like that. Yeah. That's what it sounds like.
And that's what it's going to be. Yeah.
And so there's that element to this too. Like, I think it kind of has two different things happening at the same time. And unless you kind of like both of those things, one of them is going to seem really weird or really like it doesn't fit together. But, like I said, I understand what you're saying about the horror thing. To me, it had just kind of like a Flash Gordon feel to the whole thing. And maybe I'm just being influenced by the cover art. It just really sets the tone for what you're hearing, the album art. And it's really actually kind of what drew me to it, because I've been listening to a ton of similar type music, and all of it is grainy black and white photo of like a woods and snow in the woods or whatever. You know what I mean? Like it's all death oriented. Like, and that's great. I love that too. But then when I saw this album cover, I'm like, wait, how the hell does this fit in with that? And honestly, it kind of doesn't. I think it shares a ton of elements with all those different kinds of music, but this one felt a little different to me. I thought it was cool.
Yeah, I think at the end of listening to this it took me about 3 times to fully get it. I still don't think I fully get it.
Right.
But at the end of about 3 times of listening to it, I started to really appreciate it. Somebody like myself who, this about me, Eric, I'm fully unfamiliar with like power electronics and outside of like something like Throbbing Gristle or even like some 9 Inch Nails type stuff or Big Black or something like that, bands in that kind of category. I think that there's something to be said for this type of stuff. It's very interesting. It's very it's got an artistic merit to it that isn't relying on convention at all in any way whatsoever.
Right.
It's very much an expression, I think. And it probably, you saying that it was inspired by like a sci-fi author totally makes sense, because I think you almost have to have those type of influences to make something good out of something like this. You know what I mean? Like,
sure, having a concept makes a difference.
Yeah, having a concept makes a difference. Exactly. Yep. Like this isn't the type of music where maybe this exists, but you're not going to find like emo power electronics, I don't think, is what I'm saying. Like, maybe it exists. I wouldn't be surprised if something like that. But you know what I mean? Like most of the time when you hear something like this, they're not talking about their heart being broken and finding the next girl or something. You know what I mean? Like,
and the other thing of that is like just the format and how it works. There's not a lot of room for emotional diversity.
Exactly.
You know what I'm saying? Like, it is a constant barrage of atmosphere and sort of like setting and feeling and stuff. But it's like, we're just going to deliver it in this one outrageous drony way. It's just going to do this thing. Like, we're not going to pull back and have like a super emotional break in one of these songs. Like there's no room for it.
It doesn't really defy emotion, because there's emotion in his delivery. Like, he really sounds like he's passionate about what it is. You know what I mean? But like, I'm just saying, like, it does, like you said, it does kind of sound like like a villain of Doctor Who making a record or something, which is totally cool.
Yeah,
you know?
It is. And it's cool that you thought so much about it, because here's something I think about sometimes. Like, I know that our listeners are probably similar for the most part. Obviously, I don't want to exclude anyone. But a lot of the people listening probably know us, and are of the same sort of age and sort of musical background and pedigree and stuff. Like, we've listened to a lot of the same stuff probably. And a lot of times when I'm bringing newer ideas of music to our show, part of the reason is because I love it and I'm excited about new things, but also because there is connective tissue here. And I think as you get older, it's easy to think, well, the stuff I used to listen to makes sense and is cool and has merit, and this new stuff doesn't. It's stupid. Very stupid. But honestly, like, if this album was a King Buzzo side project, everyone would be like, this is amazing. Then the other thing we're going to review after this, if someone said this is the new Secret Chiefs 3, would be like, oh, that's sick.
Yeah, that is a really good point.
So I think we need to be open-minded to new things. And that's part of the reason I kind of present these sort of things, So
I'm gonna offer, because I think that's a really good point. I think that sometimes our opinions are overshadowed by the fact that we just don't know who the new artist is, and it kind of takes us out of our comfort zone.
Yeah, that's the thing too. Is like, I think that we put up a lot of walls as far as genre goes, and I think that's misguided as well. Like, I think not only does it make artists feel that they have to do a certain thing, which is counter creative as far as I'm concerned, but it also dictates what you're willing to listen to. And the funny thing about this for me is this all started with, I don't even remember actually where it started. It started sort of with like all the Memphis funk stuff I was listening to. And then that moved into like sort of like dark industrial ambient stuff. And then that moved into like more like power electronics and stuff. And now it's kind of led me towards this next thing we're going to talk about. And if I would have just said like, well, I only listen to hip hop and that's why I like this Memphis stuff, I would have never moved on. Or if I said, I only like this kind of music, I wouldn't have discovered any of this that has connective tissue. There's ideas and elements that run through this entire group of different kinds of styles and genres and people, and all of them feel like they're separate from each other.
Sure.
And I just think, like, why do we do that to ourselves? Like, we should just follow the rabbit holes as far as we can. We shouldn't at some point be like, well, wait a minute, this is something that I won't allow myself to listen to now, And I think that happens a lot, especially as we get older, I hate to keep harping on that, but I'm sure if there was some kind of study done, most people listen to the same stuff they listen to from the age 15 to 25.
For sure.
30, maybe.
I know
that's what they listen to for the rest of their lives. And whatever, I don't care. Do what you want, but don't shit on new things just because you feel that the only good things that came out were during that time period of your life. Like it I don't think it should work.
Yeah.
Personally.
If you are going to shit on those things, at least give the new things a chance.
For sure. But yeah, I just think it's interesting, and to test that idea even further, we also listened to an album that I think is even probably more divisive in its own way. And so here, I got to do like a little disclaimer here.
Sure.
Before we even get into any of this next record. Okay. This isn't a political show, and I shouldn't even have to say this, but we would never purposefully promote fascism. I mean, I personally have no problem saying that I am against fascism.
Sure.
And so...
me neither.
I feel that it's silly I even have to say that. But here's the thing. We're going to start talking about a couple of subgenres. So Dungeon Synth, I would think most people listening have at least heard that term or whatever. Dungeon Synth has been around for quite a while. As far as it being its own genre, not as long. But I mean, people can cite people all the way back to the 60s if they wanted to. You know, I would say that unfortunately Varg from Burzum was probably a pretty decent influence on the whole thing. So basically Dungeon Synth is almost exactly what it sounds like. It's one of the most aptly titled genre names, I think. So a lot of times it's a single synthesizer. It usually deals with sort of like folk themes, fantasy themes, and that's kind of the way the music is. It's funny, there's a guy here in town named Larry Sievers, Larry the Wizard Sievers, and he's been recording records since the 80s that to me sound like this, and he has so many records, and you should check them out because they're all super cool. But anyway, okay, so more recent subgenre of Dungeon Synth is called Keller Synth. And Keller Synth is kind of weird. I mean, it is weird, but I find it to be really fun. Basically, it's, I would say black metal done on 8-bit kind of chiptune kind of synth sounds. And so it has this real silly feel to it. It's like the party music of Dungeon Synth, basically.
Yeah.
It's really fun. Like I can remember a couple of like haunted house or horror themed Nintendo games from back in the day. And this totally reminds me of the music on those. Like trying to think of there was one about
Castlevania.
Yeah, Castlevania. That's a perfect example. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So this is basically like Castlevania music.
Yeah.
With pretty intense like black metal drumming, like programmed drumming. But there's breakdowns, there's doubles time parts. It's just really fun to listen to. Unfortunately, Keller Synth, like black metal, has, for some reason, it attracts or is attractive to people with far right ideologies. Okay. Beyond that, there's a subgenre of Keller Synth called Tanzelcore, and it's similar except it is closer to like the EDM version of Dungeon Synth. So a little more like electronic music minded versus black metal music minded. Mm-hmm. And one of the groups we're going to talk about, we're going to talk about a split between two artists. One of them is called Lysergic Suicide, and the other one is called Tenebris or Tenebris. I'm not sure exactly how to say it. But through my research, I wasn't actually able to verify if these guys have any of those ideologies. And the only reason I'm bringing it up is because I would never purposefully promote that kind of stuff. Right. But there's no indication that that is the case. And if I'm wrong, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to promote that stuff. But it's difficult when you get into certain genres you have to be pretty diligent about figuring out what you're listening to and what those people believe. But anyway, I'm just saying I had a lot of moral conflict regarding this, which was the reason that I initially said, let's just do a different record.
Sure.
Because I didn't even want to get into it. But I realized that we had never really talked about Dungeon Synth on the show. We obviously have never talked about Keller Synth or anything like that. And again, it's something that I wanted to introduce to our listeners, because I think if we would have heard this back in 1997, it would have blown our minds. It would have been our favorite thing to tell our friends about. Have you heard this fucking crazy stuff? You know?
Mm-hmm.
And so I want to be excited about what we're talking about. And and I want it to come off as exciting. I want our listeners to be excited about things. So I'm just going to roll the dice and we'll talk about it. And I don't know, shit, if they're fascists, I'm really sorry. I don't know what to say.
Yeah.
You know, but I did want to address that before we even get started.
Sure.
So, but like I said, this is a split between Lysergic Suicide, who I think fall probably closer onto that Keller synth side of things, and then Tenebris, who is a little more into the Tanzel core kind of stuff. Lysergic Suicide, the only thing I could really figure out about them is they're from Brazil, and sometimes they go by the name Nihil, Nihil. And all I could figure out about Tenebris is they're from Indonesia. So this is a split on Spotify. It goes every other track. So the first track is Tenebris, second track is Lysergic Suicide, so on and so forth.
Oh.
On Bandcamp, it's actually split in half. The first half being the Tenebris part, and the latter half being Lysergic Suicide. So that's kind of confusing. But honestly, when you listen to it, you can hear which one is which, for sure. The black metal drums are like so intense and true to black metal that hearing the like synth over it, like the 8-bit synth parts over it, is just hilarious to me. Mm-hmm. Like, I think it's the funniest thing I've heard in so long. Like, I put it on, I'm like, you gotta be shitting me. This is like hyper pop taken to the most extreme ridiculous level ever, you know, or even dungeon synth or any of it. Like, it's just this extreme insanity. And then the Tanzel core side of it, like I said, is a little closer to EDM, and this shares a lot of similarities as far as like the way the music works, but the production is cool, and it actually reminds me of a lot of that Memphis funk stuff, like the tape sound glitches or ducks out, like it sounds like the tape is getting eaten, you know. The bass blows out the rest of the music. Like, it's got a lot of those similar production elements. And yeah, I just loved the sort of relentless goofiness of both of them. But yeah, I don't know. I just talked for so long. What do you think about it, Dan?
Yeah, I thought it was a fun as hell, honestly, listening to it. It's I've been using the term polar opposite a lot lately. And I'm going to say that it is the exact opposite of Stress Orphan musically, for sure. In terms of, it goes by very quickly. There's not really a lot of thought you have to put into it. Like with Stress Orphan, I really had to like sort of think about what I was listening to a little bit. You know what I mean? Like with this, it's just, I just kind of sat back and like went with the vibe. And yeah. totally sounded like hyper pop to me, for sure. This was just a blast to listen to from front to back. I really enjoyed it. I think, it definitely had a like at times it kind of reminded me of like a instrumental version of like 100 gecs or something. But then also like, and I can't for the life of me remember any of the dungeon synth artists that I checked out. But it was kind of like a Bandcamp rabbit hole, you know? Yeah. And this put me in mind of a lot of those same artists, but I think this was done, I don't know, there definitely is like an intensity, like almost like a confrontational quality to like this music.
Yes, I agree with that.
It's very, definitely the video game music chiptune influence, I think.
It's very fun and very silly, and all the artwork is like the silliest shit I've ever seen.
Yeah,
like it's really so funny. Yeah. It's like some amalgamation of like anime, and like psych tape cover art and black metal, and everyone are witches, and they're wearing witch hats, and it's so stupid. Like it's really hilarious.
Yeah. and so, the name of the album is Adventures in Nightmare Land.
Yeah. Yeah, they're so fun. They're so funny.
Yeah, it's like got like sort of like almost like a neon sort of like element to it or something, or that like, you know, like carnival-esque about it almost, you know?
And it's all about like drug use and I don't know. Like it's just all really fun and funny and disarming, if you know.
I just wonder how serious they take this, if their intention is to make it fun, or if their intention is to kind of just, well, let's just make this crazy and mind melting, and let's try and make people feel uncomfortable. I couldn't imagine that with this, because I don't think it makes people feel uncomfortable. I think if anything, it makes people feel like they're inside an arcade or something.
I do think that the point of what they're doing aesthetically is to be hilariously dark and dangerous and irreverent. And like that sort of aesthetic I've seen in lots of different things, you know. It's like really irresponsible stuff. Like the artist Tenebris, almost all of their stuff is about mushrooms and partying. And so, like,
I'm sorry, that just
it's great. It's always like witches, mushrooms, partying, like, and all this stuff is like hilarious. Like the EP put out by Tenebris after this is just called Shroom Guy, and the artwork sucks. Like it is so dumb.
That's great.
But yeah, I think it's all very funny, but I do think the point is that it seems like it's this one thing, but underneath it's actually really dark and scary, and they're purposefully trying to make it seem like they're trying to hide how dark things are.
Sure. I can totally see now why you're saying this. Remind you of the Memphis Funk stuff, because that's exactly what like horrorcore is.
Yeah, and not all of it is this silly. Like some of it is, like if you look at the Lysergic Suicide stuff, they have more like a black metal kind of aesthetic on a lot of things. It still has a lot of cutesy witches and shit, but they have a record called Psychiatric Animism, and I mean it just looks like a black metal record. Like it, you know, I don't know. It's about witches and black metal and synthesizers and drugs. Fun and darkness, which is the best combination.
It's the best combination. I mean, that's pretty much 99% of the music we listen to, Eric.
I think so.
Fun and darkness. I mean, even Big Black is fun and darkness.
For sure. Yeah. So, I mean, we talked quite a bit about that stuff, and I do think it's worth checking out, and I do think it's worth going down the rabbit holes.
For sure.
Like my favorite track on this split, my favorite Lysergic Suicide track is called Ethereal Cilio-Cybernetic Trails. Really good song. And then my favorite Tenebris song was the Supernatural Party. Really, really a good song.
I think my favorite track was Worm Noodle.
Yeah, Worm Noodles.
I really like that one. And also their Supernatural Party.
Yeah, that's
this really is good. I'm definitely going to go down the have you checked out more of the Lysergic Suicide stuff as well?
Yeah. It's funny because I would say that this split is sort of the extreme versions of both.
Mm-hmm.
Like the more like, pardon the pun, but synthesized version of what they're doing.
Sure.
I think when you listen to the records, it's like they're not as dialed into this very specific sound. But
sure.
A lot of obviously the same ideas and sounds and everything. So yeah, it's fun. And honestly, I spent quite a bit of time there this week. So
what else have you been listening to this week, Erik?
So yeah, like I said, I've been going down this kind of rabbit hole. So the first thing's Opiated Devil Sperm, pretty awesome. The record I've been listening to is Divine Intravenous.
Is that a Dozen synth project?
It's kind of like a Keller synth thing. Actually, a little more aggressive. I don't know. Yeah, check out Opiated Devil Sperm, pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
Then a project called Bowl Torn. The record's called Bulwark, and I would guess that is actually, I would call that closer to like dark ambient, black ambient, or whatever you want to call it. Some Black Moth Super Rainbow. That's kind of a holdover from listening to Malibu Ken so much. And then I actually have also started to look into this. I guess it's a genre they call library music. And it's basically things that were recorded to be used in TV shows and movies, almost like royalty-free kind of thing. So kind of like Muzak. But specifically, I've been listening to a record by Nino Nardini with Roger, and the record's called Jungle Obsession. And it honestly is basically like background music for like maybe a jungle documentary. It's pretty good stuff.
That sounds interesting.
Yeah, I've been on a weird trip this week musically. So
yeah.
How about you?
So I've been listening to Deftones a little bit this week. In particular, their album Saturday Night Wrist. Flipper. I've been listening to Generic Flipper a lot.
Yeah.
There's this band called Laurel Meets the Obsolete. Another thing that I've been discovering this week for the first time in like forever, and I promise this is the last one, is I've been listening to Noi because over the past year since you introduced me to Tego Mago, I've been really getting into Can, and so I figured Noi is the next step in my krautrock education.
For sure, good stuff.
Yeah. Anyway, if you want any more future readings from me, like if you want me to read your future, like I did with Erik, as you can hear, I predicted it completely accurate.
100%.
100%. Like I don't know how I did it, but I did it.
Amazing.
If you want your future predicted, you can do one of two things. You can email us at accelerativ.thrust@gmail.com or message us on the Instagram. Or you can watch The Simpsons because they always predict it anyway.
In the subject, please put future reading from Dan or something along those lines so that I don't open it.
Let us know let me know what you want.
Yeah, because I don't predict the future.
No, Erik predicts the past.
Yeah, that's true. I predict the present.
So if you want the present to be predicted, like what's going on right now.
Yeah, what's the coolest thing right this second?
Yeah,
I got you covered.
He's all up with the coolness.
Yeah, that's right. I'm a tastemaker.
He's hip, daddy-o.
Jesus Christ.
That's what we should do. Like, we should start like saying Daddy-O after everything.
Oh my God, Daddy-O, we gotta go.
What's going on, Daddy-O? All right, Daddy-O. It was a good episode, Daddy-O.
Okay. Bye.
Bye, Daddy-O.
Wow.
We really screwed the pooch on this one again, didn't we? Wow, this is like really scary sounding.